Generally speaking, I lived with mom and dad for my 4th and 5th grade between the years of 2000 and 2002, which was the first time I ever remember us being all together as a family. That's when 9/11 happened. I was going to another elementary school called Gordon. Personally, I don't like that period of my life. Ashquelon is a big city next to Gaza, and at the time there weren't any rockets, but my parents' constant fights were like rockets for me. Gaza still belonged to the Jews at the time. Unlike my grandma, Dad is very messy, which is not to say I'm not, but the problem was that he wasn't picking up after me and doing chores like Grandma spoiled me with. A huge prop to Grandma is that she cooked delicious meals and I had the whole neighborhood friends for me. While in Ashkelon, I had a few but not as many as I had in my lifetime, and not as nearly as much as freedom. I couldn't go every place I wanted because it was not safe to wander around as a kid in a huge city. Because my lifeline was extremely small, that was not a problem. For these reasons, I often felt lonely. I thought that I would be happy with Dad finally consistently on my side, but he smoked all the time, and specifically he smoked in my room to the point that I had pneumonia for the 3rd time in my life. Dad played many games on the computer that was in my room, staying overnight and smoking up a storm. Not to say that we didn't have fun times as a family. We went to Park Sampson with Dad's friends, baked kebabs, and often would go to the beach with Mom. The problem was that Dad was not working. He had occasional gigs here and there as a carpenter, but not a usual job. Therefore, he lived on unemployment, for which reason there was constant bickering back and forth between Mom and him. I just enjoyed my time either in my studies or outside with my Orthodox friends where we played dodgeball. Dad built a very fancy desk and got a fancy office chair for me on Mom's account for my studies, but at the same time, Mom didn't pay anything for rent. His big concern was that I had a good posture because I was doing schoolwork very often. His concern for my posture was so that I would have potential marriage prospects in the future and retain my youthful beauty. Despite the fact that my parents were living together, Mom insisted that he continued paying alimony while Mom was also not working. I did not keep track of what she was busying herself with throughout the day. What is interesting about that period, though, is that Mom liked to mold figures out of clay, and Dad encouraged that talent. He bought her clay, and for some reason, Mom molded the figure of Jesus. Now, don't think Mom is a believer just because she molded the figure of Jesus, but the figure was very much in the likeness of him preaching. I never asked her why she had done it. She had other figures that she molded, but I don't remember them though. Also, on the wall in my parents' bedroom, Mom drew the Virgin Mary. I never got curious or asked her what it was about. I just thought it was supposed to be there. My paternal grandma, Sophia, lived nearby, and she was a Christian Jew. But my parents never made a big deal about it, so didn't I, and I didn't know what it meant to be a Christian Jew. One day, though, I came to Grandma's house and saw a crucifix on her bed. I fumbled the figure with a momentary curiosity, but for some weird reason I never bothered to ask Grandma about it, lost all curiosity and tossed it back on the pillow in a never-mind motion. Jesus was all around me and I was blinded. I think we all were blinded, and my parents continue walking in blindness to this day. 4th and 5th grade were socially the hardest school years ever. I was not used to the new school. I was not used to the unfamiliarity of it, of the spaciousness of it, and of all kinds of students whose families I didn't know. My lifetime, everybody knows everyone, and my grandma was friends with most of the parents of my peers, whereas in Gordon, everybody was a stranger. I dressed very poorly because we were poor, and the kids in school noticed. My clothes reeked of tobacco. Mom, however, bought me a Pokemon school planner, Yaman, that was kind of expensive, and someone from the class took it behind my back and threw it into the girls' toilet. I told the teacher, our mechanechet, Daphna, who was young and pretty, and she forced the entire class to each give me a shekel to buy a new yuman, and I kept track of the list of whoever owed me. I raised 28 shekels, but it was no longer affording the cost of fancy yuman that I had. What's important here, though, is that everybody took responsibility of one person's wrongdoing. Another incident was when the entire class claimed that I had lice when I had no lice, but even my friend Christina, who was a new Russian immigrant to whom I was faithfully helping out to get adjusted to the language and culture shock, fell into the peer pressure against me. Another time, the entire class just ignored me. Why was I singled out to such animosity? I don't know. I was an early bloomer, and both girls and boys didn't know what to do with me, how to react to my significant body curves. I looked beyond my years, and puberty hit me very early. I was covered with pimples for which I was constantly made fun of. Despite being poor in the eyes of my peers, I was one of the best students in my grade, next to another guy named Shy, and the school load was merciless. I took full responsibility over my education. I would like, however, to spend some time talking how Israel treats the topic of immigration. Immigration in Israel is not uncommon because of the right of return spoken of earlier. Although the biggest immigration is from former Soviet Union countries, Jews are known to be spread all over the world, and Israel not only helps them materialistically to settle, but it accommodates them through programs that help them learn Hebrew, especially school-age immigrants with classes called Ulpan for adults that didn't take advantage of these programs. The difference between the United States treating its school-age immigrants and Israel is that Israel is not taking those individuals out of normally paced classes like how the United States shoves immigrants into ESL, English as Second Language, classes that significantly slow them behind and put them under a major disadvantage. Israel lets those students experience the full shock of a normally paced class while giving them side assistance to reach the expectations of a normally paced class. It's true that immigrants are expected to put a double effort to catching up to the material of the class, but it pays off later. For example, Christina was specifically seated next to me because I was a Russian speaker, one of the best in the class academically, and the teachers knew that I would befriend and help her wrestle with material. In return, Christina taught me how to write in Russian cursive, a skill I used later on in my life when I was in handwritten correspondence with Mom. However, occasionally throughout the week, Christina was pulled out from class periods and given additional material to work on by Russian-speaking teachers. The point is that Christina was given the opportunity to assimilate into a regular class load and be subjected to native Hebrew speakers, which in return allowed her to have a reference point to where she needed to be academically. What does the United States do with young immigrants? It segregates that crowd to be amongst each other in strictly ESL classes, gives them lower expectations, and then it bites them on the rear as they are not given the opportunity to reach their full potential. It feels as though the United States is condescending to people whose native tongue is different than English. I get irritated when in some formal documents you are asked to indicate what the most widely spoken language in your household is. What you need to take into acknowledgement is that I'm filling out the application in English and you can read it, and that is all that should concern you. It is none of your business what language I prefer to speak in. Is this question for discriminatory reasons? One time, though, Mom was teaching me division, and I wasn't getting it as fast as she expected me. So she slapped me on the face. How in the world can I get the material when I'm being hit on the face? Dad continued to teach me Russian, and we continued reading newspapers. Over the summer, I went to children's camp called Kaitana, but it wasn't the same as in Ma'ale Ephraim. I did not connect to people very easily. Throughout the year, I took the extracurricular class of chess, so I was still mentally stimulated. In my free time, I read many books in Hebrew, including Harry Potter. There's one book of which title I don't remember, but it was about how they were two angels, and one angel was scheduled by God to be born into a human, while the other angel was very distressed by that because their friendship was very strong and he didn't want to be separated. I don't remember their names, but let's call the angel that had to become human Joseph, and the angel friend that was in distress for being separated from Joseph to be David. The way the book explained the process was that the moment a baby is born and takes an earthly breath, he forgets all of his past angelic times. One heavenly day was 20 earthly years. David promised that he would come after Joseph to earth. Before they would be separated, David put a mark on Joseph by cutting the back of his neck to give Joseph some kind of memory of David when Joseph would be born into a human. Eventually, David found Joseph one heavenly day, 20 earthly years after, and Joseph wasn't remembering anything. I don't remember how the book ended, but as I was reading the story, it was interesting to me because I have had a scar-like slitter in the back of my neck since the day I was born myself. Did an angel mark me? I touched that mark as I read, thought maybe the book was about me, smiled and moved on. There were many peers that had asked me where I got that mark from, and I just told them I was born with it, which was the ultimate truth, but I wondered why I had it myself. I asked one of my teachers, whose name was Orly in Bet Talmid, while living with Grandma in Ma'ale Ephraim, and she simply said that a sun ray kissed me on the back of my neck. Also, there was one magical time that I spent with Mom during spring seasons in the Pardes, an orchard-like field that was next to our house, full of yellow glimmering flowers. Mom used to weave flower crowns from them as she plucked them, which was a Ukrainian custom. That crown is called venok in Russian. She would place it on my head in a ceremonious coronation gesture and call me her princess. There's a tradition in Ukraine that a young unmarried girl sets her venok into a river to float to the other side, and whichever guy finds it is believed to be destined to marry her. There was one occurrence that happened to me due to my nonchalance. When I was in 4th grade, 9 years old, I entered the mall called Chutzot, and the guard carefully rummaged through my stuff as I held it open. I joked by saying, "Ke'ilu yesh li ptsatsa," as if I have a bomb. The guard looked at me threateningly and said, "Stemit peh," shut your mouth. His seriousness was so edgy to the point that I flinched at his voice, and I have never since joked about such things. Another ironic thing to note that my dad bought groceries at a store called Rachamim, which means mercies. And today, as an adult, it seems to me that we all do desperately need mercy, especially my dad. While living with my parents, my great-grandma Sima died in March 23, 2001, on her own birthday. In the summer of 2002, after I finished 5th grade, I visited my maternal grandma, and Grandma was super nice to me. She did not lift her hand against me. She did not argue. She allowed many sleepovers. It was the summer of my dreams in my own comfort. I almost couldn't recognize Grandma. My friend Tanya begged me that I should stay, and I willingly decided to come back to school in Ma'ale Ephraim for my 6th grade. To this day, I don't regret the decision. My life with my parents together was unmanageably dysfunctional. They are not meant to be together at all.